Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with part 6, Rosicrucian Fire Philosophy, from the Philosophy of Fire by R. Swinburne Clymer. Let physical science answer. We have always been taught and accepted without question that the mind functions in the brain, that through mental processes we do all our thinking, planning, reasoning, and judging, all this taking place in the head. Why is it that when we receive unfortunate news there is no feeling in the brain, no pain, not even a depression, but instead a heavy, cold, nauseating feeling in the pit of the stomach, directly over what is termed the abdominal brain? Why does the solar plexus feel cold, nervous, and we lose our appetite when under a mental, so-called, or physical strain? If the mind functions only in the brain, as the majority believe, why is there no pain in the head, no depression or mental blurriness, rather than an uncomfortableness in the stomach? Is it not a fact that throughout the Bible little is mentioned respecting the brain, but time and again are we reminded to be watchful of the belly, the reins and the loins? Is it not a fact that the vast majority believe the mind to function in the head merely because we see through the eyes, and they are in the head? A study of the abdominal brain would be of inestimable value to the student of science, science being due to the discovery of a fact known to the scriptural writers. More anon. Rosicrucian Fire Philosophy sparks surrender out of the world when they disappear to us in the universal ocean of invisible fire. What is its disappearance? It quits us in the supposed light, but to it really darkness, as fire born, the last level of all, to reappear in the true light, which is to us darkness. This is to understand, but as the real is the direct contrary to the apparent, so that which shows as light to us is darkness in the supernatural, and that which is light to the supernatural is darkness to us, matter being darkness and soul light. For we know that light is material, and being material it must be dark. For the Spirit of God is not material, and therefore not being material, it cannot be light to us, and therefore darkness to God. This was the belief of the oldest initiates, the founders of magical knowledge in the East, the discoverers of the gods. Also the doctrine of the fire philosophers and of the later Rosicrucians, who taught that all knowable things, both of the soul and of the body, were evolved out of fire and finally resolvable into it, and that fire was the last and only to be known God, as that all things were capable of being searched down into it and of being thought up to it. Fire they found when, as it were, they took this world solid to pieces, and also as metaphysicians distributed and divided the mind of man, seeking for that invisible God thing, coherence of ideas. Fire, these thinkers found in their supernatural light of mind, to be the latent, nameless matter started out of the tissues, certainly out of the body, presumably out of the mind, with groan, disturbance, hard motion, and flash, when forced to sight of it, instantly disappearing and relapsing and hiding its godhood in the closing violently again solid matter, as into the forcefully resuming mind. Matter, the agent whose remonstrance at disturbance out of its rest was, in the winds, murmur, noise, cries, as it were, of air, in the waters rolling and roaring, in the piled floors of the sky and their furniture, clouds, circumvolance, contest and war, and thunders, defiant to nature but groans to God, and intolerable lightning rendings, matter tearing as a garment, to close supernaturally together again, as the solid fettered and chained, devil-bound in the hand upon it, to be. In this sense, all noise, as the rousing or conjuration of matter by the outside forces, is the agony of its penance. All motion is pain, all activity punishment, and fire is the secret lowest, that is, foundation spread thing, the ultimate of all things, which is disclosed when the clouds of things roll for an instant off it, as the blue sky shows in its fragments like turquoises when the canopy of clouds is wind-torn, speck-like from off it. Fire is that floor over which the coats or layers, or the spun kingdoms of matter, or of the subsidences of the past periods of time, which is built up of objects, are laid, tissues woven over a gulf of it, in one of which last we are, to which fire we only become sensible when we start it by blows or force, in the rending up of atoms, and in the blasting out of them that which holds them, which then as secret spirit springs compelled to sight, and as instantly flies, except to the immortal eyes which receives it in the supernatural on the other side. The fire philosophers maintained that we transcend everything into fire and that we lose it there in the flash, the escape of fire being as the door through which everything disappears to the other side. In their very peculiar speculations, and in this stupendous and supernatural view of the universe, where we think that fire is the exception, and is, as it were, spotted over the world in reality to go out when it goes out, they held that the direct contrary was the truth, that we and all things were spotted upon fire, that we conquer patches only of fire when we put it out, or win torches out of the great flame when we enkindle fire, which is our master in the truth, making itself in our beliefs, in our human needs, the slave. Thus fire, when it is put out, only goes into the underworld, and the matter flags close over it like a gravestone. When we witness fire, we are as if peering only through a door into another world. Into this, all the things consumed into microscopical smallness. Of this world, the compressed and concentrate matter heaps of defunct tides of being and time are in combustion rushing. Kingdoms of the floors of the things passed through, up to this moment held in suspense, the invisible inner worlds, all roars through the hollow. All this is mastered in the operations of this fire, and that is rushing through the hollow made by it in the partition world of the knowable, across and out on the other side into the unknowable, seeks in the fire its last and most perfect evolution into absolute nothing, as a bound prisoner urges to his feet in his chains and shrieks for freedom when he is smitten. In fire we witness a grand phenomenon of the subsidiary, or further and under and inner and multiplied birth and death, and the supernatural transit of microscopic worlds, passing from the human sense worlds to other levels and into newer fields. Then it is that the last spirit of which they are composed is playing before us, and playing into last extinction out of its rings of this side matter. All which matter in its various stages of thickening is as the flux of the supernatural fire, or inside God. It will appear no wonder now, if the above abstractions be caught by the thinker, how it was that the early people considered that they saw God standing face to face with him. That is, with all that in their innermost possibility of thought, they could find as God in fire. Which fire is not our vulgar, gross fire, neither is it the purest material fire, which has something of the base, bright lights of the world still about it, brightest though they be in the matter which makes them the lightest to the material sight, but it is an occult, mysterious, or inner, not even magnetic, but a supernatural fire, a real, sensible, and the only possible mind or God as containing all things and as the soul of all things, into whose inexpressible, intense, and all-devouring and divine, though fiery gulf, all the worlds in succession, like ripe fruit to the ground, and all things fall, back into whose arms of immortal light, on the other side, as again receiving them, all things, thrown off as the smoke off light, again fall. At the shortest, then, the theory of the Magi may be summed up thus. When, as we think, fire is spotted over all the world, as we have said, it is we who make the mistake necessitated in our man's nature, and we are that which is spotted over it. Just as while we think we move, we are moved, and we conclude the senses in us while we are in the senses, everything out of the world being the very opposite of that which we take it. The views of these mighty thinkers amounted to the suppression of human reason and the institution of magic or Godhead as all. It will be seen at once that this knowledge was possible, but for the very few. It is only fit for men when they seek to pass out of the world and to approach the nearest according to their natures, God. The hollow world in which that essence of things called fire plays in its escape in violent agitation, to us, combustion is deep down inside of us. That is deep sunk inside of the time stages of which rings of being, subsidences of spirit, we are in the flesh. That is, in the human show of things, in the outer. It is exceedingly difficult through language to make this idea intelligible. But it is the real mystic dogma of the ancient Guebres, or the fire believers. What is explosion? It is the lancing into the layers of worlds whereinto we force, through turning the edges out and driving through. In surprisal of the reluctant, lazy, and secret nature, exposing the hidden, magically microscopical stores of things, passing inwards out of the accumulated rings of worlds, out of the, within, supernaturally buried wealth rolled in of the past, in the procession of being. What is smoke but the disrupted vapor world to the started soul fire? The truth is, say the fire philosophers, in the rousing of fire we suddenly come upon nature and start her violently out of her ambush of things, evoking her secretist and immortal face to us. Therefore is this knowledge not to be known generally to man, and it is to be assumed at the safest in the disbelief of it, that disbelief being the magic casket in which it is locked. The keys are only for the gods, or for godlike spirits. We imagine it will be said that it is impossible any religionists could have seriously entertained such extraordinary doctrines. But incredible as it may seem, because it requires much preparation to understand them, it is certainly true. It is only in this manner the ideas of the divinity of fire, which we know once prevailed largely, can be made intelligible. We mean to the philosopher who knows how properly to value the ancient thinkers, who were as giants in the earth. Obelisks, spires, minarets, tall towers, upright stones, menhits, monumental crosses and architectural perpendiculars of every description, and generally speaking all erections conspicuous for height and slimness, were representatives of the sordid or of the pyramidal fire. They bespoke, wherever found and in whatever age, the idea of the first principle or the male generation emblem, see divine alchemy. Having given, as we hope, some new views of the doctrine of universal fire, and shown that there has been error in imagining that the Persians and the ancient fire worshippers were idolaters, inasmuch as in bowing down before it, they only regarded fire as a symbol or visible sign or thing placed as standing for the deity, having in our preceding lines disposed the mind of the reader to consider as a matter of solemnity and of much greater general significance this strange fast of fire worship, and endeavored to show it as a portentous, first, all-embracing as all genuine principle. We will proceed to exemplify the widespread roots of the fire faith. In fact, we seem to recognize it everywhere. Instead of, in their superstition, making fire their god, they obtained him, that is, all that we can realize of him, by which we mean all that the human reason can find of the last principle, out of it. Already in their thoughts had the Magi exhausted all possible theologies. Already had they, in their great wisdom, searched through physics, their power to this end being much greater than that of the modern faith teachers and doctors. Already in their reveries, in their observations, deep within their deep souls, upon the nature of themselves and of the microcosm of a world in which they found themselves, had the Magi transcended. They had arrived at a new world in their speculations and deductions upon facts, upon all the things behind which to men make these facts. Already in their determined climbing into the heights of thought, and these titans of mind achieved past the cosmical through the shadowy borders of real and unreal into Magian power. Passing through the mind worlds and coming out, as we may figure it, at the other side, penetrating into the secrets of things, they evaporated all powers and resolved them finally into the last fire. Beyond this, they found nothing. As into this they resolved all things. And then on the throne of the visible they placed this, in the world invisible fire, the sense thing to be worshipped in the senses as the last thing of them and the king of them. That is that which we know as the phenomenon burning fire, the spiritual fire being impalpable, as having the visible only for its shadow, the ghostly fire not being even to be thought upon, though being its medium of apprehension when itself had slipped, the waves of apprehension of it only flowing back when it, being intuitive, had vanished. We only know that a thought is in us when the thought is off the object and in us, another thought being at that simultaneous instant in the object to be taken up by us only when the first has gone out of us, and so on, but not before to be taken up by us. That thought being all of us, and a deceptive and unreal thing to pass it all to us through the reason, and there being no resemblance between it and its original. The true thing being inspiration, or God in us, excluding all matter or reason, which is only built up of matter. It is most difficult to frame language in regard to those things. Reason can only make God. He is only possible in his own development, or in his seizing of us and in possession. Thus Paracelsus and his disciples declare the human reason become our master, that is, in its perfection, but not use as our servant, transforms, as it were, into the devil, and exercises his office in leading us away from the throne of spiritual light, over and in the world seeming better, in his false and deluding world light or matter light really showing himself God. This view of the human reason, intellectually trusted, transforming into the angel of darkness and effacing God out of the world, is borne out by 1,000 texts of Scripture. It is equally in the beliefs and in the traditions of all nations and of all times, as we shall eventually show. Real light is God's shadow, or the soul of matter. The one is the very brighter, as the other is the very blacker. Thus, the worshippers of the sun or light or fire, otherwise they would have worshipped the devil, he being all conceivable light. But rather they adored the unknown great God in the last image that was possible to man of anything, the fire. And they chose that as his shadow, as the very opposite of that which he really was, honoring the master through his servant, bowing before the manifestation, eldest of time for the timeless, paying homage to the spirit of the devil world, or rather to beginning and end, on which was the foot of all, that the all or the last might be worshipped, propitiating the evil principle in its finite shows, because, as they that alone a world could be made, whose making is alone comparison, it was permitted as a means of God, and therefore the operation of God downwards as part of him, though upwards dissipating as before him in whose presence evil or comparison or difference or time or space or anything should be impossible, real God being not to be thought upon. But it was not only in the quickening spirit of divinity that these teachings could be seen. Otherwise than in faith, we can hope that they shall now, in our weak attempts to explain them, be gathered as not contradictory and merely intellectual, but seen as vital and absolute. They need the elevation of the mind in the sense of inspiration, and not the quickening and sharpening of the intellect as seeking wings, devil pinions, wherewith to sail into the region only of its own laws, where of course it will not find God. Then step in the mathematics, then the senses, then the reason, then the very perfection of matter work or this world's work sets in, engines of which the satanic powers shall realize. The evil spirit conjures, as even by holy command, the translucent sky. The archangelic, clear, childlike rendering up in intuitive belief, intense in its own sun, is faith. Lucifer fills the scope of belief with imitative dazzling clouds and builds splendors. With these temptations it is sought to dissuade, sought to rival, sought to put out saints' sight, sought even to surpass in seeming a farther and truer, because a more solid and a more sensible glory. The apostate, real-born Lucifer, is so named as the intensest spirit of light because he is of the things that perish, and of the things that to mind, because they are all of matter, have the most of glory. Thus is one of the names of the devil, the very eldest born and brightest star of light, that of the very morning and beginning of all things, the clearest, brightest, purest, as being soul-like of nature, but only of nature. Real law or nature is the devil, real reason is the devil. Now we shall find with a little patience that this transcendental, beyond limit or knowledge, ancient belief of the fire, God is to be laid hand upon, as in a manner we shall say, in all the stories, and they indeed are all, where belief has grown, yea, as a thing with the trees and plants, as out of the very ground in all the countries and continents, and in both worlds. And out of this great fact of its universal dissipation, as a matter of history the most innate and coexistent, shall we not assume this fire doctrine as being the truth? As a thing really fundamentally and virtually and vitally true? As in the East, so in the West? As in the old time, so in the new? As in the pre-Adamite and post-Diluvian worlds, so in the modern and latter-day world. Surviving through the ages, buried in the foundations of empires, locked in the rocks, hoarded in legends, maintained in monuments, preserved in beliefs, suggested in traditions, born amidst the roads of the multitudes in emblems, gathered up as the recurring, unremarked, supernaturally coruscant and yet secret, evading, encusted and dishonored jewel, in rites spoken to those capable of the comprehension in the field of hieroglyphics, dimly glowing up to a fitful suspicion of it in the sacred rites of all peoples. Figured forth in the religions, symbolized in 100 ways, attested, pre-noted, bodied forth in occult body as far as body can, in fine, in multitudinous fashions and forms, forcibly soliciting the sharpness of sight directed to its discovery, and spilt over a floor as underplacing all things, We recognize, we spy, we descry, and we may lastly admit the mysterious sacredness of fire. Why should we not admit it? Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.